Hi, good evening. This is Cora Strack again. I'm on your side. I was just listening there to Mr. John Waters and a number of people from the US, very distinguished people as well, judges, former judges, and professors of constitutional law and various presidents, former university presidents, and so on, all talking about the health of democracy. There are a lot of people have been saying it's been declining for several decades, maybe 5 decades, but obviously kind of we're at a crisis point now. So I'm trying to understand why. How this has happened, and how we can all jump up and down saying that it's not working and we should replace it by maybe something else, but what has gone wrong? And this is what I'm trying to understand, because I don't think you can fix something if you don't know what really is going wrong. But I mean, today now there was a report out, and it sounded very similar to previous reports, potentially or possibly. Wouldn't say it was sitting on the fence, but it wasn't. Saying definitively saying something, that was clearly, in my opinion, very problematic. There was a softness about what was reported. So, has democracy stopped correcting itself? So, I have come across this quite a lot just looking at oversight systems, and this is where I think that the failure is happening. The correction isn't there. So, has democracy quietly stopped correcting itself? So this is my for my analysis. We're told democracy works because it self-corrects. That is absolutely not true, and because it repeatedly fails to self-correct over many years, there's no proper accountability. So this is where I see the real failure of democracy. There is not correction, the proper correction, inverted commas. Scandals happen again and again and again. Investigations follows. Report is published. Lessons are learned. The report is put on the shelves. Some recommendations, and I have had a situation where recommendations were recommended for a particular investigation that was done. And when I inquired from the relevant authority, were the investigations ever implemented, I got silence. And I would say that is the case with many investigations. There's a softness in them, and they won't go against the institution because the various investigators won't get the next gig, they won't be paid, and so they won't get the next gig, and so there's no self-correction. So I mean, I would say this is widespread everywhere. But look closely. How often do oversight reports actually impose real consequences? Instead of clear accountability, we'll get soft language, procedural shortcomings, communication failures, opportunity for improvements, potential this, possibly this, all of this sort of soft language. Notice what's missing: full responsibility, full accountability, sanctions, structural change. These investigators are terrified to go against the institution because they feel they won't get the next investigation. Now, there should be some sanctions for institutions that do this, to investigators. You see, that will be a way of correcting the situation. So if there's conflict of interest there because the investigator feels that there's, so I feel myself that these investigations go on and on for so long that nothing really, it's a pointless system, this oversight system. It's not working. And how many people have stood up and said our oversight systems are doomed to fail? And they have failed democracy, and they have failed accountability, and they've failed transparency, and they're not going to work. So we need a new view of how we do correction. That is my opinion in terms of solutions, because everybody's talking about the problem and very few are offering practical and sensible solutions. So if correction produces no meaningful consequences, is it really correction? Or it is reputation management? That seems to be what it is, reputation management. Democracy depends on accountability, but institutions also depend on stability and public trust. So here's the uncomfortable question: when oversight protects the system more than it protects the truth. Now, how many times does it do that? What is the probability of that happening? I mean, it's about 90%. It's actually more, I would say. Is that democracy? Is that democratic self-correction or democratic decline? And is that one of the reasons, or a key reason why? Or is it the fact that it is impossible for a democratic system to correct itself using this kind of oversight system? And what then should you replace the oversight system with? I mean, we need courts, we need certain types of oversight systems, adjudication systems, but there doesn't seem to be any dialogue in terms of what solutions can we have. Now, one of the things that I've been looking at is just, say, dispute resolution, not replacing adjudication, which you get in the workplace relations in Ireland, and you get in the courts and in many other, in arbitration. It depends on adjudication. That means somebody comes in with a legal team, for example, somebody comes in without a legal team, with a friend or whatever on their own, and of course the legal team nearly wins 99% of it, irrespective of the merits of the argument. That is a fact all over the world. That's a fact. So that adjudication system is not working for democracy when there isn't equal balance. And even when you have a win-lose system, as this judge was saying about this, or one of the people in America was making this point about it was the professor of philosophy at Harvard, somebody I have great time for, about the winners and the losers, that sort of system, what I'm trying to do in my work is come up with solutions. And to say that this win-lose adjudication, there's too much of this right in society, this win-lose, or the winners and the people left behind, and all of that. So we need this is what I'm trying to advocate for really, in terms of solutions, a new system of dispute resolution, which goes alongside the court system, or is underneath it, if you like, so that when we have disputes, that we can go into a civilized domain and we sit down. And as this other judge was saying, nobody's talking to each other anymore, that in America people are so divided that they're shouting at each other. They can't have a civilized discussion about anything anymore. So we have to learn, maybe to relearn how to do communication. And in a proper dispute resolution, interdisciplinary dispute resolution system, to solve problems, to try and solve problems. I sort of started with family law, but I could see how this could be. This model could be interdisciplinary model, state funded, could be used in a lot of areas of law. And then the ones that couldn't go through that system, which weren't appropriate for that system, and it would want to be trauma informed, would go directly to court, or the ones that didn't, but it would have to be mandatory, and we have to, as somebody said, the civilization has gone out of Ireland. We're not civilized. It's greed. It's everybody's competing, and again, it's the win-lose attitude. If I'm not winning, or the other person is losing, this sort of attitude it's totally and utterly uncivilized. It's never going to generate any kind of proper democracy or solutions, and it has failed. This oversight system has failed democracy. It's doomed to failure because of conflict of interest, and it's almost impossible to take conflicts of interest out of these oversight systems completely. So I think we need to look at dispute resolution, conflict resolution in a different way than we have been doing. Now, whether is it the legal profession or is it just the laziness of people? I just cannot understand why we're not looking at a new vision for justice. And the vision for justice is that we replace the education model, not replace it, but we introduce a new layer, which is more about dispute resolution, which is more about healing justice, the justice that heals rather than justice that harm. And it focuses on not who's wrong or who's right, but what is the problem and how can we try and solve it using an interdisciplinary approach to problem solving. I mean, that's how a lot of problems are solved in business, and yet, problems in families are disputes in other cases aren't solved like that. So it seems to me that we're lacking vision in terms of how to move to correct our democracy. That we certainly, I don't think we're going to correct it using oversight systems which are producing, rubbish, not one rubbish, but very weak reports, and which nothing is done. Fortunes are paid, in legal fees, X, Y, and Z, and nothing is done to solve the problems. So I would like to have introduced it in a lot of my research, the whole idea of interdisciplinary problem-solving approach to dispute resolution in the first instance where there is a dispute, and that's accessible and affordable, and it involves, reflecting the complexity of disputes in modern day life, and it involves, legal people with legal background, with background of trauma, psychology, probably financials, the various elements that are, in a dispute. There are 5 or 6 interdisciplinary kind of disciplines that you would need to solve a lot of disputes working together. Like going into a judge for many cases and expecting the judge adjudicates, but in a lot of cases they don't have the knowledge of the complexity in a lot of cases, as is the case with many solicitors. I mean, these complex disputes require interdisciplinary teams, I think, to solve the dispute, to try and resolve it, to correct the harm, rather than to say one harmed or one was wrong and that one was right. And I think this judge was the judge, the professor, the philosophy professor. Yeah, he's from Harvard, and he's just won a major award. But I think if I was to take his point, I agree with him completely. And I refer to him in my YouTube, the earlier YouTube. But I think what we do need is solutions. We need a new vision for justice. And for problem solving and dispute resolution, because everyone, like he was saying, somebody was saying there, one of the other judges was saying everybody was shouting at each other. They were all shouting. People aren't speaking to each other anymore. They're shouting. They're just, in other words, they're pushing their view down your throat. They won't listen to what you're saying. They won't take into account and give you your space, give you your time. They just say, I know what's right and what I'm right, and you're wrong, without even taking your point of view into account. So this is my view for a healing justice that I've written a lot about, and it's getting quite a lot of interest around the world, this kind of view. But it's affordable, it's doable, and it's practicable, and it makes sense, and yet nobody's talking about it, because the vested interests are all about escalating disputes, and this is not going to heal democracy. It's not going to heal, the darkness that's everywhere in humanity. It's not going to bring out the best in people. What brings out the best in people is when they work together, when they're collaborate, and if they are in dispute, perhaps a dispute resolution system will help them learn how to problem solve better if they've got to the stage where they're not able to solve their problems on their own. And a lot of disputes get to the stage where they're intractable, and it's a sign that for a long time that they have needed help with problem solving. So this is just something I'm raising because I'm listening to everybody talking about how the state of world democracy in so many places, that previously, had, but it's just the vision for change, for fundamental change. In I would say, if we start with the justice system or dispute resolution system, that would be a great start, to have a new vision where we're not looking about assigning blame in the first instance. We're trying to find a solution to heal harm, rather than blame, play the blame game. So this is something I'm passionate about, but I just haven't read anything much about it because I'm kind of out there trying to get people to buy into it, but I don't know, I'm not in a position where I can advocate for the type of change that I think we need. But I'll just state it here that what I think we need is a justice system which heals rather than harms. I think it needs to be state funded, and it needs to be particularly in family law, perhaps employment law, perhaps in probates. Look at the world of families fighting for years with wills and all of that, and a lot of those disputes with an interdisciplinary team and people sitting around a table, people might learn to resolve their difference in a civilized way with the help of an interdisciplinary team funded by the state. And in the cases where this does not work, but I think it should be mandatory, because I don't think it's fair that the judiciary should have to deal with litigants in person. And conversely, it's not fair that litigants in person should be in front of judges who expect standards of presentation required of a trained legal profession. So I think it's a mismatch, and I think we need a different system, or a layer. And we always need our courts, so we do need that layer of justice. They're absolutely essential, but I think we're missing a huge part of, and I can't see access to justice, which is something I'm passionate about. But it's not just about access to justice; it's about access to solutions, problems, healing, a justice that heals rather than a justice that harms. So that's adding to some of the points raised by many of the distinguished people on my YouTube video that I referred to earlier today. And so I'm someone that's looking for solutions, and they're not easy to find, and it has taken me a long time to come up with this one. But it would be nice to get views on this, and to get a buy-in, and to get people thinking about a reimagining justice.